Good afternoon. I'm Steven. I was with Jefferson County as an emerging tech analyst, and now I'm working in the private sector for a healthcare organization as a principal of AI and automation.
So, Stephen, and so tell me about this playbook that you created around delivering your AI training.
Yeah, so this playbook was built off of the lessons learned from doing the rollouts in our county. And it was designed to be there as a toolkit for people that are also starting their AI journey. I think the key takeaway from it is that you don't have to wait for the perfect conditions to begin your training journey. I
Mm,
outline a lot of the best practices and groundwork before you can start on rolling your education plan out.
cool. So, in Jefferson County, what conditions did you wait for?
Well, I think the biggest one was the executive leadership buy-in, making sure that you have sponsors that are
Mm,
willing to provide that weight to it.
so once you've got someone up at the top ready to say, "Go, take this playbook," and they can roll with it.
Yeah, I think that's important. I do know a lot of people really try to focus on the governance guardrails and having the perfect policy in place. What we
Yeah.
had was an acceptable use policy and best practices while we were beginning our training journey. And that allowed us to really codify
Mm,
some of those into a policy while still giving people guardrails initially.
interesting. I see. So you basically had like you said acceptable use policy with some kind of, is it fair to say informal guidelines?
Yeah, so we didn't want to shut down people
Yeah.
trying to explore and innovate, but we did
Yeah.
want to make sure is clear, like what you could not put into the tools, what you could use the tools for, and really started to give them a way to reach out if they had questions.
Awesome, awesome. So you built just the first step of that support, and then from there started delivering the training for folks.
Correct.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna share or just show off this uh playbook that you put together. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Cool, cool. And I want us to walk through this because I think what you and the team and our training working group put together on this is awesome. And it's also really cool to hear that this is basically what you used in Jefferson County. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's correct. And the same principles are what I've used in other organizations too for training.
So, okay, well, tried and tested, battle tested. I love it. So maybe we can start here on the table of contents. So walk me through, what does this really cover?
Okay, so I think it's important because AI is such well, relatively new technology, and
Yeah.
people are curious about how to even get started. So I wanted to make sure that the playbook started off by plain language explaining who the appropriate audience was, whether you are an executive down to maybe an implementer or a training leader, and some of the
Mhm.
key takeaways from what a structured training program could provide. Then I broke it into the phases of how to deliver it, going from your initial planning and initiation phase through delivery, sustainment, and then what it could look like if you wanted to start scaling it. A lot
Mm,
of the stuff in the appendix is tools and kind of checklists to help you along the way. So that first factor prompting quick reference is that's how I usually teach people to interface with AI. And it's an easy mnemonic to learn how to prompt. And then the other checklists are kind of how do you go through the journey? How do you make sure you're at the appropriate stage of readiness to get going, to scale, how to decide what data to use, and then some starting metrics to measure the effectiveness of your training, and then a whole bunch of other resources.
so awesome. So let's dive into it. Um, let's see. So you walk me through, I'll scroll for you, but walk me through kind of the playbook and start talking me through some of these sections.
Yeah, so basically this program was developed around 12 weeks just so you can have three months worth of information. That's not written in stone, so you can always condense it a little bit if depending on the readiness of your organization. But this outlines the general flow of the playbook and the types of leaders and public sector kind of like managers and roles that would best benefit from it. I think the key thing at the bottom that says this does not require, it's important to remember that there's a lot of training programs out there. Everybody is still figuring out AI, so you don't need to have a huge background in AI and machine learning algorithms to start training.
Hmm. You don't need to be, you don't need to know how to build an AI model to start using an AI model.
Exactly. And most people learn better from hands-on experience anyways. So I think that's one of the strengths of this training program is that it progressively walks people from the basics of prompting an AI tool to building out agents, doing data analysis, and some of the more advanced features. So I will say the one prerequisite that you really need to have in place is you should probably have some kind of AI tool that you do want to use. So
Hmm.
whether you're a Microsoft shop with Copilot or a Google shop with Gemini, um, this will work better if you have an AI tool.
So as long as you got a tool, and I'll give a plug for folks to the first playbook that was talked through by Marty Wolford at Salt Lake City, who talked through all about getting those first starts, those first steps put together, especially with the executive sponsor and making that happen. So, um, let's let's get into this. Um, so what do I need to know when I initiate?
Yeah, so basically, you want to think about it just like any project. You need to have some kind of sponsor in place. You need to start thinking about who's going to be responsible and accountable for the delivery of the training. So once you have those set up, then you need to start. You don't need to have an AI governance committee out the gate, but you should have some people that are vested in the process. So maybe your data owners or your IT leaders, people that can make sure that what is being done is rolled out in a safe way from a compliance and security perspective. But I think it's important to focus on like where you are in your journey. So every organization is at different stages of AI implementation. And so you need to consider like what skills do you need to focus on? You don't need to start teaching people how to vibe code or deploy their own
Hmm.
bespoke models, but you need to understand, are people hesitant around AI and why is that? Are people really excited? And how do you keep that fire going in a safe and responsible manner?
Yeah, I like what you have here on the ways that we can measure uh things to quantify for this.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that always comes up is what are the AI use cases? And I don't think you need to start with something really ephemeral. You can start off with we all deal with emails. We all have calendars to navigate. We all go through some type of analysis. And so if you start talking people through just like really simple things that are safe, there's not a big blast radius if you mess up a calendar invite. But if you start breaking down the AI implementation into things people understand and can actually experience firsthand, that'll start to demystify a lot of it and it'll open up a lot of other use cases.
I've had you're bringing a memory of someone from our environmental services division. He brought in his like 800-page code book. He dropped it on the floor and he said, "Now I can have ChatGPT read this and help me actually get through this thing."
Exactly. That's a perfect use case.
So, so no, and that's awesome, awesome. So cool. So let's so we've got success criteria, we've got considerations. Um, what else do folks know before they get started?
Well, I think it's important to make sure that you have agreement on what success looks like. I think that
Hmm.
just with any project, whether you're in IT or you're in HR, you're all going to have different definitions of done, definitions of success. And it's important up front to sit down and figure out like what do you want? Do you want to improve user adoption of the tool that's like Copilot or Gemini? Do you want to unsurface more advanced use cases? Do you need to stress test your AI governance? But I think upfront, you need to at least have a general idea of what you want to focus on while you're developing and rolling out this training program.
Yeah, and so would you say that maybe choosing some of these metrics to measure uh or usage might be a good place for folks to start on that ROI?
Yeah, and I think later on in the playbook, I do have a bunch of recommendations around metrics, and that can be
Oh,
a good
perfect.
resource to kind of get the wheels turning.
Awesome, awesome. We'll get there then. So I want to move into the media's part of this document, which is the actual 12-week curriculum. So what does the curriculum cover?
So the curriculum is designed to be very progressive or sequential rather. And we start off with just the foundations. I think it's important when you're doing the training to reinforce the safety and best practices. So when the program was being delivered, every class we would cover proper prompting. This uses the factor framework. There's a lot of frameworks out there and different types of prompting styles, but it's important to make sure people understand that good prompting not only saves them time, but it also makes their work more efficient. It also reduces like the environmental impact because you're not going back and forth a million times. But we
True.
focus on that as well as safety and guardrails because it's very easy. We're all moving between spreadsheets, Word documents, and so there might be sensitive information in some of those. So if you don't start building that muscle memory of considering what you're putting into the tools and then also checking what's coming out of the tools,
Hmm.
people will quickly forget that.
Yeah, the ownership of what goes in and ownership of what comes out.
Exactly. And that's how you can avoid the AI slop. But I would say that
There
we
you
build
go.
from week 1 through week 12. Week 2 is really focusing on how to start bringing in AI into general work processes. So we start off with very low risk ones like drafting an email, generating a summary. If you use tools like Copilot in Teams, it can generate the transcripts and then you can chat with it. But when we did the training, the way that it was structured was every week there would be a live session that was recorded, and it was built around starting off by opening up space for people to ask questions because we wanted to really cultivate psychological safety. Then we would go into the material of the week. We would do a demo. We'd leave people with kind of like a lab slash homework that was voluntary. And then everything was always tied to some kind of use case that people would understand. So this first one's very simple. It's generate an email. We all have email. As we go and get more advanced in the 12-week program, you'll see other examples where it's like analyzing data for a specific survey. But I think this structure of starting off with giving people room to ask those questions, then covering the topics, and then giving them a demo so they can understand it and leaving them with homework, that really helps build a lot of those ha best habits.
Yeah, it's getting them started on testing something, uh, and it gets them thinking even outside of the class to actually how this can integrate into their work.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the strengths of having like a very cross-functional training cohort is that a lot of us, we don't necessarily work with people outside of our departments, but when you bring all these people together, you'll start to spark new ideas because maybe the way that the fleet team is approaching a problem can benefit the open space team, and you'll only get that cross-pollination by
Mm,
bringing people together.
interesting. So when you delivered this training in Jeffco, it was cross-departmental. It was just people from different parts of the organization.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that's what I do in other organizations as well, is make sure that it's not, there is benefit to having a team do it. I think the pod approach is also very effective because even within our little groups, you can start to develop silos. But when we did it, it was cross county people from different departments were participating.
Yeah. I'll just say that's the same approach that we've taken at the city of San Jose. And another benefit of it was just now you have someone in each department that becomes an expert,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That's something I should have covered up front is we did really want to focus on the champions network and kind of like building those people that become the AI SME for their team. So that's a good call
Hmm.
out.
Yeah. All right, cool. So walk
So
keep
yeah,
keep me
week
going on this.
yeah, so week three was focusing on research and information verification. So whether you're using ChatGPT or Copilot, Gemini, Anthropic's models, all of them have research, but it's important to start teaching people that AI will be very polite and very confident in its responses. So while it's a powerful tool for pulling in more information than you could search for yourself in a day, it's important to validate what's coming out because it will provide citations, it will provide links to other sources, but we wanted people to make sure that they were double checking their work.
Absolutely.
And then week four, that started to move into like lightweight agents. So if you use Copilot, they have the agent builder, ChatGPT. At the time, it just had the custom GPTs. Now they do have full agents in the enterprise and skills. But this was starting to teach people that when you start thinking about automating different types of work, it works best when you know the process very clearly. There's little room for like damaging effects, and there are automations that don't necessarily need a high touch from a human. So this was really starting to think about just process improvement and like process mapping really, because if you can do that, then you can start to build agents and little assistants like this.
Absolutely.
So week five, that starts to get into more of how do you give people a toolkit to go back to. So I know a lot of people like to save their prompts. They like to when they get a really good output, they enjoy reusing that multiple times. So this covers how do you build out those libraries. In Copilot, they have the nice feature where you can save your prompts and you can share those
Right.
with people. But I think this starts to build your AI COE because then you can start having one place that people go to figure out, okay, what kind of prompts are people using? How are they deploying or employing the AI tools? And when you have a central place, just like having the cross-functional training, you can
Yeah.
start to get that cross-pollination in a more asynchronous way.
Right, right. And you said COE?
Oh yeah, AI Center of Excellence. So for us, and I always use like a SharePoint. It can be a Google page, whatever your organization has. But the
Hmm.
AI Center of Excellence is a good starting point. It doesn't have to be very fancy or complex. Ours started off very simple. It was here's the policies and procedures, here's some resources, here's some cool use cases. And as you get more and more people going through your training, more people bringing up ideas to you, then you can plus up the center of excellence and eventually you could build an agent that can answer a lot of questions on it.
Fascinating. And so people are they're finding the prompts that work for them, and then they have the power to post on the Center of Excellence, whether it be like a web page, a SharePoint site, a forum, whatever their space is, to share what worked for them.
Exactly. And you can also add things like an AI registry to it so people can see like what tools are approved, what's out there. So it's a good place to build like a digital, watering hole. And then in week six, that's when we start to really get into AI is only going to be as good as the information you provide it. So you need to really focus on what data are you providing? How do you optimize the usage of that data? And this can be in the Microsoft environment, you have Dataverse and you have your work IQ and you have all these ways to pull this data in. Sometimes it's good to have a lot of data, sometimes it's not. So we cover a lot of how do you best apply that to your AI tool of choice.
Yeah. And speaking of data, going into the reporting of it.
Exactly. So then the next week, then you roll into how do you start leveraging these tools to do bigger amounts of quantitative or qualitative research. So if you have a lot of surveys, we go through and talk about how you can use LLMs to start parsing out that semantic information. How do you use things like Copilot's analyst agent to do that?
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, I've seen a lot of folks build assistants where the main goal of it is I've got, you know, 1,000 comments from residents, and normally we can't read through all of them. Can we at least get some insight from these?
Exactly. And it's also a good use, or it's a good example of how to keep an eye out for even just bias, because you start to learn
Hmm.
what kind of words will semantically change the outcomes. So it's also a great learning opportunity to drive that message home as well.
Could you give me an example of what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think one example that always comes to mind is in a colloquial sense, we always say you guys. It's not gender specific, but
Yeah.
if AI sees like, oh, they said you guys are doing this, then it's going to infer it's like an all male population.
Oh,
So little semantic things like that can really skew the outcomes. Um, a lot of the gender ones, age ones also come up. I think a classic age one is just looking at emails. Certain email URLs indicate certain generational demographics. So there's a lot of those little things that we never think about because we just do
yeah.
it out of habit, but that does really lead the AI down a certain rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. The difference between a Yahoo, a Gmail, SBC Global. Yeah,
Exactly. So yeah, it's a really interesting rabbit hole to go down. But after that, then we start looking at the workflows. So
yeah.
workflows are available in all the different platforms. So a lot of people are familiar with Power Automate, and this is kind of like the next step after you build just like a little Copilot agent is you start adding more actions that the tools can take. And this will lead a lot more into the next playbook with agents. But it's again a good practice of process mapping.
For sure, for sure. And then more into the workflows.
Yep. So this is kind of building off of that and saying, Copilot's a great example. You have all of these transcripts, you have your calendar, and with Copilot, because it's connected all these things, instead of sitting there and trying to figure out like what is the agenda for the meeting? Who do I need to invite? What do I need to talk about? You can start using Copilot agents to pull all that information together for you so it can give you a better proposal of what are the follow-on action items after a meeting? What do we need to schedule afterwards? And again, it gives people a chance to see where the AI can fail because that'll teach them like what to look out for. Maybe it hallucinates somebody that wasn't in the meeting, or maybe it hallucinates a meeting that never even occurred. So it's another good chance to drive responsible use home.
Right. Every mistake that the AI makes is a lesson that we can teach our students.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to be clear, right? You bring up Copilot or the agents there, but this is something that can work for any of the platforms. It's just
Exactly.
right.
Yeah, it's
Copilot was
the
the one that
Yeah, that's
yeah.
what we use. I think it's really important not to get married to one tool or platform. Fundamentally, they're all Copilot is using ChatGPT and Anthropic models. Gemini has their flavors, but they're all doing the same thing. They're all intaking information and then generating a response or taking actions. So
Right.
this can apply to anything.
Yeah.
And then governance and responsible use. This isn't saying that we waited until week 10. Throughout the 10 weeks prior, we were constantly driving home best practices, no PHI, no PII. But this is starting to expose people to kind of like the broader impact of AI and different types of governance frameworks and best practices, because as we all know, it varies state to state through the federal level and even internationally. So this is starting to get people aware of when you're interacting with
Mm,
all these tools, different rules and different considerations need to be applied.
yeah.
So this really goes to, I think it's Appendix B or C for the PII chart, but it's basically talking people through how do we check for bias and what is bias and how do we red team the outputs? How do you think adversarially about these tools?
Interesting. So that's covered in Appendix B.
Yeah, or C, I can't remember.
Okay. But it's here. It's here.
It's back there somewhere, yep.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then measuring impact and demonstrating values. This is kind of the precursor to the capstone approach, but
Yeah.
I think it's important that while you're doing this, we were providing surveys to our participants and then also doing kind of one-on-one interviews with them just to get feedback and see what was working. And I think it's important because if you ask somebody if they're saving time, like most studies show they're going to grossly overestimate the amount of time. So it's important to start
Mm,
thinking about objectively, how do we tell if AI is actually improving our work, or is it just introducing a new type of unseen labor that's occurring because we're actually redoing our prompts, or we're having to recheck everything. So this is just talking about like, how do you really start to think about this from a process improvement standpoint and make sure that you're improving quality as you deploy your tools?
mhm, mhm. And when I see like objective metrics, time logs, output comparisons, as the is this something that I, as the instructor or like the say the AI lead in the agency, these things that I should be looking at, or am I teaching my staff how to look at them?
Well, it depends on how many people you have, what kind of resources. In smaller
Mm,
places, it might all be one person. A
right.
lot of this is going to come from like your system administrator teams. So when this started, one of my questions was how can I verify what the survey results are showing? And so that meant I needed to coordinate with our system admin team and figure out we have all this purview data. How can I look at those kind of logs, more security type logs, and how can I use those as a more quantitative approach to assess like the effectiveness? So it does require some cross collaboration between the different departments, but depending on your resources, it might just be one
For sure.
person.
For sure. For sure. And
And
then
then, yeah,
oh,
capstone and peer review. So this is really, I mean, I think it's important not to put homework on people. We all have our jobs and we're all super busy, but there are some people that are going to be really enthusiastic and have some really interesting use cases, and they've never felt empowered to like explore that. And so leaving this room for a capstone is not only kind of like a cool morale booster for people, but it can start to show the impact of AI. It starts to get other people seeing it as something that is more than a glorified Google machine. It's something that can actually perform actions, it can actually provide value, and it can help their employees focus on constituents, on the services that matter more.
do you have any capstones that you've seen that you remember?
I think one that really stood out to me is there was somebody that was very technical, like a very technical engineer. And one of their pain points really was that there was so much legalese and all these regulatory documents, and people didn't understand it. And so he started off by just saying, like, how can I make this clearer for people? And eventually he was able to get to the point where he built an agent that could take really dense regulatory documents and then translate it down to the sixth grade adult reading level and have the taxonomy and kind of clarity around these really dense documents that are in plain language now. And that was a really cool, I thought that was a cool use case because it was somebody that is very technical, but recognizes the challenges that that technical expertise can
Mm,
lead to, and they found a way to overcome that.
that's super cool. So they built it basically to bridge the gap.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think like that lent itself to things like translation and providing that same information in other languages other than English. So it doesn't sound very technical or very fancy, but it's a really impactful use case that allows people to have broader access to services.
It Going back to that, I remember I was telling you about that guy from environmental services that, dropped the 800-page code book. So he's been with the department for 25 years. And so he knows a lot of that front to back, but he saw this as an opportunity, one, to help him a little bit, but also he can give this assistant or this agent to his younger staff to be able to start getting up to speed, right? As
Mhm.
almost like a passing down of his knowledge.
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh,
It's great for that.
so anywho, all right. Now I'm I want to know just a little bit about, um, I've done this program, assuming I've gone through the 12 weeks. How do, where do I go from there?
Yeah, so I think from there, you don't want to be perpetually doing the 12-week trainings. And so that's why the
Mm,
Champions Network and starting to develop like a community of practice or a center of excellence, just like a way to kind of crowdsource the adoption. So this is where you can start getting into maybe you stand up. We had an AI kind of like craft session once a month where we would bring in people and you could just talk about AI. It didn't have to be technical, it could be more existential and philosophical, but it was a way to bring a lot of people together on a recurring basis, share what they're learning about, share their concerns. And that's how we were able to continue growing this community of practice and community just around making it safe to ask those questions and safe to explore. So that's one thing you can do. There's always lots of different trainings that I'm sure people are seeing from. Well, if you're a Microsoft shop, they have all sorts of training resources. But from here, it's really trying to grow that grassroots level of engagement and adoption.
yeah, building it from the ground up.
Yeah, and I think that's important too because like I said, you don't want to be doing 12 weeks of the beginner sessions every quarter, but what it allows you to do is then start to develop the more advanced training because some people will be like, this is really cool. I want to learn how to do agents, or maybe I want to learn how to like red team AI models and things of that nature. So you can slowly start to provide more resources to people. And as people use these tools, they start to understand where it fails, where it excels, what the concerns and dangers are. And if you have one place like a community of practice or a center of excellence, then people can keep sharing those insights and upskilling everybody together.
So
And
with
yeah,
that last part,
yeah, so basically just scaling from there, I think this has a lot of best practices from GSA, Microsoft, other organizations. Um, I think a lot of this is reiterating what I talked about, but the champions are important because AI is really unique in that you don't have to be a coder by trade to start vibe coding. You don't have to be like a machine learning expert to start doing analysis in your spreadsheets. So you have these tools that start to democratize a lot of skills that people may or may not have had in the past, but they need to have someplace where they can go to get that information. And as you build this network out, you slowly start to develop an HR champion, a human services champion. You start to grow more and more of this network, which helps the entire agency.
absolutely. And I want to just touch on, because you've alluded to them a little bit, these appendices.
Yep.
So we've seen the factor. I love this. What what would you like to make sure people know from the appendices?
The appendices, while they are kind of a cheat sheet, I would still encourage you to read through the program because they'll make more sense. But I think that after the verification checklist, this is kind of like the bare minimum of as you're going through your training, make sure that you have
Mm,
kind of like best practices. So no PII is inside of the data. Make sure that when you're interacting with AI, just keep an eye out for bias. One example of bias that comes to mind, which I hadn't have thought of, was AI can be biased in that it's biased towards you. So people think of sycophancy,
oh,
but I had never thought about it that way. But somebody from our legal team brought that up and they're like, yeah, there's a lot of bias. And when he explained the sycophancy is bias, it kind of like turned on a light bulb for me. So this is kind of little checklist things to keep in mind. I think the next one is the PII verification. Yeah, decision tree. So I think that this can be kind of a good cheat sheet to put on your center of excellence. And just as a reminder for people, because there's tons of spreadsheets everywhere, there's databases everywhere. It's easy to grab a spreadsheet and throw it into your tool of choice. Maybe that. a lot of people don't understand kind of the differences between protected health information, protected or personally identifiable information, but reiterating on those to people that if you're putting enough things that can point to a single individual, you probably shouldn't put it into AI. So this is just a real short list to go
Yeah,
through. And again, when in doubt, it's better to ask questions than to just freestyle it.
yeah, absolutely. And I love this if basically asking and something for the person delivering the training to think about, check with whoever in your organization leads data, or maybe it's your legal team or someone from IT. What level of data sensitivity is this tool okay for?
Exactly. I think it's important not to um, be kind of the bad cop in these situations because everybody is playing with their tool of choice. It's
Yeah.
important to not, reprimand them on the spot. I mean, notwithstanding some sort of incident, but it's important to point them back to the tools that they have because
Mm,
like I alluded to earlier, everybody loves certain kinds of tools. And a lot of times you'll say, have you tried this in Gemini, for example? And somebody might say, no, I love Claude way more. And when you explain to them, well, Gemini is approved and it can do all these things also, and you show them that, you could start to get that mind shift change so you can redirect those behaviors towards the approved tool.
yes. Not a no, just a redirect. I love that.
Exactly. And then this is how to start thinking about red teaming. So people hear about a lot of different horror stories of AI outputting, really negative comments, people abusing chatbots. This isn't designed to turn somebody into an AI red team expert, but it is kind of like questions to start asking as you use these tools. I think it's really easy to deploy one of these and then totally forget about it until something happens. But when you think about it just like risk for any other system, any other tool
Yeah.
you're using, if you start building that into people's mindsets, it'll help them think about, okay, have I checked to see if there's any PII getting into the data? Is this tool starting to give counterfactual information or are the policies that I have in the background of my agent, are they all outdated? So it's just questions to start thinking about.
Absolutely. And let's see. Okay.
Oh yeah, here's
Sample
the metrics
metrics.
ones. So yeah, these could be a good starting points just when you're thinking about building your surveys or measuring
Mm,
success. So there's nothing super advanced or crazy in here. It's more things like driving adoption, getting people to use their outputs but verify them, people that are using their tool every couple days, things like that.
right. Right. Great. And then of
Eh,
course the resource index.
A lot of resources.
Awesome. Always more to be reading.
Exactly.
Well, Steven, this is awesome. So I just I want to give you a moment, right, for those that have digested this document, or even if they just skimmed it, what what are some final thoughts or things that you'd want them to walk away with?
I think the most important thing to me is with these tools and with training, everything is changing so fast. But you should never be scared to learn something more, take another training class. You should never feel that you've mastered any of these things. I've given trainings to countless people, but I still watch training videos online. I still watch to see what people are doing and how they're learning because sometimes people that have never touched AI are going to ask a question or propose a use case that you never thought about. And that's great. You learn, they learn, and everybody improves. So I think just always try to keep learning. Don't think the training is ever done.
Even as the teacher, let yourself be the student.
Exactly.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time on this, and so excited for our government staff and members and our government partners in civil society and industry to take the time, take a look through this. And just thank you again for walking through it with everyone.
Sure thing. Happy to do it.